President think this should be federally mandated? Vaccines across the country for this set and other sets of childhood diseases?
Well, Major, we do have a tradition, and there's a long track record in this country, of these kinds of health issues being administered by state and local officials. This is something that we went through at the end of last year related to Ebola, that the monitoring that was in place was something that was strongly recommended by federal public health officials at the CDC, but ultimately we were relying on state and local partners to carry out that monitoring. And that is a good indication of how federal public health officials and state and local public health officials work together. That the federal government can be relied upon for good scientific advice. There's a whole wealth of institutional knowledge that's contained at the CDC, that there are significant resources that are devoted by the federal government to doing the kind of research at the NIH and other places where we can make sure that the best scientific advice that is known to man can be made available to state and local health, public health officials. And ultimately, that's the way that this system has operated for generations. Now, well, what I also know is true, and is that there is a lot of case law around this, and this is something that people have challenged, I think, on both sides of this issue. And as I mentioned earlier, I did have a chance to speak to the President about this issue shortly before the briefing, and he was clear that we don't need a new law, we need people to exercise common sense.
So the federal government does not need to establish a mandate for vaccines, just recommendations and advice to states and parents on the
What
science.
the President is saying, we shouldn't have to, that the science is clear, and it is irresponsible for people to not get their children vaccinated, not only because it puts their children at risk of getting the measles, it also puts at risk the other children in their community, if it's infants who are too young to get the vaccine, or children who have compromised immune systems that they can't get the vaccine. So people need to take responsibility, not just for their kids, but for the kids in their community.
Let me follow up on Jeff's question.